timing is kind of part of the game, if you will. And I'm not trying to sound trite in this or make light of it, but the Iranians were very similar as well. I mean, and then they said that back. This was a few months ago when they had their response. I'm sorry, when Ismail Haniyeh was assassinated in Iran, Iran said, we're going to respond, and the waiting is part of the game, is part of the effort to make everybody on unease and to make them feel nervous and anxious and to await the suspense is part of it. And so Israel in this, it could be part of the game for Israel, but I think also the Israeli government is thinking, is taking their time with their decision and trying to be smart about it and responsible about it, and responsible, but I mean, responsible for what they feel is what achieves their national security objectives, even if the U.S. disagrees with that. And the Israeli government, the war has shifted, and so they have a different playing ground here to play with, and that's that they're much more heavily engaged in Lebanon than we all anticipated a month ago only. And so they have to be aware of that they're more heavily engaged in Lebanon. They've promised for a further escalation in Lebanon. They've pursued a ground invasion, which calls for a whole different level of commitment. Gaza is still ongoing. Every time they withdraw from parts of Gaza, Hamas pops back up. Hamas is significantly diminished, but again, they are still popping up in these areas, so you still see them engaged there. And so I believe they're really taking their time with it. They do care about the U.S. perspective and guidance. But again, and I've said this before, as you know, if there's a disagreement, and we disagree all the time, the Israeli government, Netanyahu administration is certainly going to do what it feels is best for its survival. But I don't believe that they want to launch a full-scale regional war. One could argue we're still in that at the moment, but a direct engagement with Iran.
With that said, Hagar, how does Benjamin Netanyahu view the next 3 weeks in American politics, with the inflection point being our election on November 5th?
Well, I want to start off by saying that I believe the Biden administration has been very supportive of the Israeli government. And that said, I believe that Netanyahu doesn't feel that way, or doesn't feel enough love, because Netanyahu has said that before, and has been quite public about that. And that said, from his point of view, from the Israeli government point of view, Netanyahu is waiting with bated breath to see what happens, because it will have an effect, especially if you're talking about Trump versus Harris administration. There are going to be significant differences in their support of Israel. Both are going to support Israel. Both are going to be committed to Israel's defense. Israel is a non-NATO ally of the United States, and the U.S., through our laws, have pledged to maintain Israel's qualitative military edge, which means, therefore, its superiority over anything military in the region. But that said, I think a Harris administration is going to try and twist Israel's arm more, is going to play more with the idea of conditioning aid, is going to be more loud and have a stronger tone about civilians being killed. Whereas the Trump administration, I think, is going to say, I'll give you what you need to wrap this up, but wrap it up. And that is what Trump has said over and over again. So Netanyahu is watching very carefully. I don't think that's holding him back. I don't think that's what is contributing to this time that you're seeing this delay. But that said, he is watching very closely, and he's trying to play both sides very closely. He knows that he's going to have to maintain friendships on both sides, depending who wins. And as you mentioned earlier, no one has been able to predict this. Don't ask me. I don't want to predict it, because none of us know.
Hagar, in our final moment with you here, we also learned over the weekend that Hezbollah drones did kill 4 Israeli soldiers, despite all of Israel's efforts to take out Hezbollah capability, hence the incursions into southern Lebanon, where now more than 1,000 people have died. What does this reveal about the capacity that Hezbollah still has remaining despite all of Israel's efforts?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. So on one hand, Hezbollah has been weakened much more than any of us could have expected this far in. By the way, I believe even the Israeli government didn't expect Hezbollah to be weakened the way it was if they looked at this 6 months ago, for example. And I can tell you, I handled Hezbollah when I worked in counterterrorist financing. It was in my portfolio in the U.S. government. Since the 2006 war, we have been waiting for the showdown between Hezbollah and Israel, and have watched Hezbollah arm itself so heavily in the meantime. And they still have more in their arsenal. They have significant precision missiles that when I was at the White House, Syria was sending to them, called Scud missiles. And so we know that Hezbollah has this capability. So on one hand, they've significantly diminished their capabilities and thrown their operation into array because of how many leaders they've killed and how they've penetrated their communication systems. This really does a lot to undermine a terrorist group's operations. And apparently what I've read is that they've targeted at least half of their arsenal so far. That said, you still have thousands, tens of thousands likely, of fighters, Hezbollah fighters, and a huge arsenal to begin with. So even if you've cut off half, you still have a big chunk remaining. And so, but I believe the Israeli government is aware of that. I mean, they know what they're asking for by going in. They know what it means to escalate with Hezbollah, that it may go in phases. And right now, Israel, I think the Israeli government is definitely the stronger one.